Micah Bedard alongside as usual, and we've only got 3 weeks left after this week of college football in the regular season. So it's amazing how fast the time goes by. We're basically down to a month to go, and so it's time to make it count. From a DFS perspective here in this final month. We have what should be a really interesting slate today. I think maybe a high scoring slate. Hopefully not as many heartburn surprises and injuries as there were a week ago, but we do have quite a few situations we need to keep an eye on. So we'll go ahead and get it rolling. Micah, how are you?
Doing good. Hopefully, I said in my article last week leading up to lock with the Devin A chain stuff was probably one of the most, uneasy feelings because you knew you weren't going to get any news on A chain. So you really just had to make a gut call on what you thought he actually did. And of course, he ended up scoring 35 fantasy points, basically all in the first half. But I'm excited to get back to it this week. Like you said, fun slate, not as much to monitor early, but do have a couple spots to take advantage of.
Yeah, John Reese Plumlee is questionable for UCF. Who knows if he will even start, if he's good to go, but he is listed as questionable. He did travel. Spencer Sanders is questionable for Oklahoma State. You are not going to get any information out of them, and that is a 3:30 kick. So even though their offense has potential, it's not like it's the greatest matchup. I think you can just cross him off the list today. Travion Henderson has been ruled out for Ohio State, so hopefully we at least got some clarity in that backfield. Mayan Williams should handle most of the carries this afternoon. The wide receiver news, not a whole lot in terms of big names that have injury designations today, of course. Jackson Smith and Jigba, you just never know what to expect. But he hasn't really done anything all year, so we can just continue to operate under the assumption that he's not going to play. Or if he does suit up, probably not for a full complement of snaps. So anything else that you're keeping an eye on for news today?
Yeah, you mentioned, and it's not like you said play him or anything. So, but JSN, yeah, Jackson Smith in Jigba, I think was ruled out as well as Travion Henderson. So I wasn't,
okay.
Yeah. So you weren't going to worry about him to begin with. Yeah, that's really it. I think West Virginia, Tony Mathis is supposed to be back, and we'll get to him when we get to running backs. But if you do get him ruled out for some reason, then Justin Johnson's a good play. But ruling these first 11 a.m. kicks. Not a lot of news that we're waiting on. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas. It's getting desperate when they're like, okay, Arkansas just got to the stadium and KJ Jefferson's on the bus with the starters and Malik Hornsby on it with the twos. Like, I don't think that means anything. So you'll have to wait till they get on the field. But KJ Jefferson is I think Arkansas gets a big hit if he's not going to play here and Hornsby gets a start. So those are really the only situations early that you're looking for.
All right, we can go ahead and dive in then and talk about the quarterbacks today. We've got interesting names at the top. We've got the usual C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young combo above 9K on DraftKings, but then that next range is probably just as intriguing and, in fact, projects just as well. With Jaden Daniels, who's been, kind of rising throughout the year for LSU. Big win for them last week. Hendon Hooker, we know, has plenty of upside. And Tanner Mordecai, who accounted for about 600 touchdowns last week. The SMU is back on the main slate this week as well. So out of kind of that group of 8K plus quarterbacks, how are you breaking them down today?
Yeah, it looks like they're, C.J. Stroud in Ohio State last week just put up a big dud in Northwestern, but that was a crazy win, like 30, 40 mile an hour winds. And so it might snow a little bit here, but I like Stroud, him and both Young. I don't think I'll have them both in the same lineup, but man, Bryce Young, it's kind of crazy to see that like he doesn't have that much upside. At least he hasn't lately. I think his highest fantasy point total all year is 35 points. So I like Stroud a lot. I think, Indiana plays a lot of snaps on offense. Like, I think the only worry here is a blowout factor, which you thought about last week, but it's weird where Ohio State played the whole game against Northwestern and still did not crush. So I like Stroud as always in GPPs at that ownership. Jaden Daniels, I mean, this guy has been ridiculous. I think 48, and 32 points or something last week or something more than that against Alabama. So I'm going to go right back to Daniels. I mean, there's no reason not to. It is a little bit of a letdown spot, but he gets there with his legs, and Arkansas's secondary, we've seen it all year. It's something you want to attack. So I like Daniels a lot too. You mentioned Mordecai. I think Mordecai is a good play. I think a lot of these SMU guys, like outside of Levine, which we'll get to, are getting hyped up a little bit. USF is terrible. I'm going to say that. But there are a lot of great options around him. Like Hooker, I think, everyone's like, oh, Tennessee had a bad game against Georgia last week. I think they want to take that out on Mizzou at home. I like him getting him at half the ownership. And Dylan Gabriel, Gabriel's price, he was priced up around Young and Stroud to start the season. Oklahoma obviously haven't had the success that we thought they were going to, but West Virginia's secondary is also awful. So Mordecai, I think is, you can see what he projects with. He's a great play, but I do think Gabriel and Hooker are interesting around him, especially Gabriel. Look at that. When you have him at 0.25% ownership in GPPs, I think Gabriel's an interesting play there, especially with Marvin Mims and Jaleel Farouk, which I'll get to in the wide receivers.
Yeah, I like those calls there. Obviously, Mordecai is going to project as the best play, and he's probably where you're starting in cash games, but really like the pivots to either Gabriel or especially to Hooker in GPPs. That Tennessee offense should be able to get back in gear today against Missouri. They just ran into a buzzsaw there with Georgia last week. So like those calls, I think those are your options. Perfectly fine with Stroud in GPPs as well. I am not holding anything against Ohio State. I watched most of that game last week, and I just can't imagine trying to throw a deep ball or kick a football in those conditions. They showed some video of a kick like getting completely knocked down in warm-ups, and it was crazy. Only living about an hour and a half away from where the Northwestern campus is, just feeling that wind that we had here, and then you throw it closer to the lake there by Chicago. I can't imagine attending that game. I can't imagine that would have been any fun. But, I'm not holding anything against the Ohio State offense this week based on that. And getting Stroud at 10%, definitely a reasonable play in tournaments. Basically, all of the 7K range is GPP only. You can see we don't have anybody projected for double-digit ownership here. But Mikey Keene, intriguing in a game with a close spread. If he does draw the start, but we just don't know. Malik Cunningham, tough matchup against Clemson, but they got housed last week, and we know Cunningham has some dual threat ability. Yeah, nobody's going to project as well as those 8K guys, but you do have some potential here, maybe just a little bit more risk. Do you like anybody in this kind of 7K range?
Yeah, actually, I was looking at my pool right when we got into the quarterbacks, and I have Gabriel at 8K, and then my next guy is KJ Jefferson at 6.5K. Like you said, this range, and it usually is on DraftKings, a little bit of a dead zone because we don't have Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has been sitting around 7.8, 7.9K. It pains me not playing Malik Cunningham, but I definitely think he has upside. It's a terrible matchup on the road at Clemson, but I wouldn't fault you for playing him. Riley Leonard was one of my last cuts from my pool. He's going to be really low owned. It's just a terrible. I'm fading that whole game. There's just a lot of spread out targets, and I wouldn't blame you for playing Leonard. He does have 100 plus on the ground upside, but I'm really not liking a lot of these guys here. And like I said, I'm dipping down after Gabriel down to that 6K range.
Yeah, not a lot there. I do like Cunningham in tournaments. He'll make my tournament pool, but other than that, pretty much X out that whole range. And then, Jefferson, we kind of already talked about. Some concern over his status. I think he's definitely in play, though, and probably going to go. That game starts at noon, so we should know before kick. And, not that LSU is just going to mail it in this week, but a little bit of a letdown spot on the road against a decent team. And Jefferson, for his dual threat ability, just too cheap there at 6,500. Jackson Dart, again, against Alabama, but you got some dual threat ability there as well. And these guys have better, kind of baseline projections, even McCarthy, than a lot of the guys in the 7K range. You've got Michael Pratt at 6,100 in a decent game environment. So these are the guys that people are probably going to be looking at as their QB2 plays.
Yeah, and then in this range, like KJ, one thing to worry about KJ too, it's just tough. I hate when coaches warm up these guys when they're not going to play. Even if, you just have to realize that if you play KJ and he warms up, he is not good to go. Because earlier this year, I think it was at Ole Miss, one of those games he warmed up and did not play. So KJ, even if he's warming up, he's definitely risky, but that probably lowers ownership wise. I bet you he settles around more 10%. Jackson Dart, Alabama has shown that mobile quarterbacks give them trouble, so he's definitely in play here too. Michael Pratt, man, I just struggle with the upside. Same with JJ McCarthy. Like those guys have to get everything to go right for them to smash, and I mean definitely they could. But my favorite play, a little bit below this, is probably Hunter Deckers. I mean, Oklahoma State's defense is awful. I mean, they are god awful. Last week Kansas just destroyed them. Deckers' price never increasing. And this team, you think about Iowa State, you think about, okay, Brees Hall and running the ball from last year. No, this team chucks it. And I mean, this is the perfect spot for them to continue to do that against Oklahoma State. I like Deckers a lot as a punt play. And the lowest I'll go here is Travis Marsh for USF. We talk about SMU all the time this week, but don't forget the reason they put up 77 points was they had to, because they gave up 63 points or 66 to Houston. So Marsh is not a great play, but I mean, 17 points. I mean, he's going to get they're going to be trailing all game. I don't mind him as a punt. I probably like him a little bit more in Mordecai lineups than like by himself. Like I don't think the game script that you think of is like USF rolls and SMU doesn't do anything, but I like playing Marsh as a run back. But Hunter Deckers is probably my favorite play down here, especially when you can get him at a half discount to. It's not like Marsh is good. Like you're not playing Marsh because he's good. You're playing him because of the matchup. And I think Deckers has a great matchup, probably a better one. And he's probably my favorite value quarterback of the slate.
Yeah, and you can do a lot with a $5,700 quarterback, or a $5K quarterback. Does help make the rest of that lineup work a little bit better. And you can see if I sort by point per dollar, those guys are up near the top in terms of point per dollar projection. I think the chalk build will be, starting with Mordecai and then going with maybe one of these cheaper options, or some double spend lineups if you're in those 8K ranges. But definitely lots of intriguing guys for tournaments as well. All right, let's go ahead and move to running back and sort by the highest price here. We don't have Mo Ibrahim. We don't have Bijan Robinson on the main slate this week. We do have Jahmyr Gibbs. We do have Blake Corum. We do have the guaranteed 30 carries of Chase Brown. And in true Illinois fashion, after going 7-1 or whatever to start the year and getting inside the top 20, they lost at home to Michigan State last week. So shout out to the Illini for doing what they usually do with the football season, but we've got them back on the main slate here today. How are you kind of handling those top trio of running backs?
Yeah, last week was pretty easy. At least when we were on the show, right? It was like, all right, play A-Chain, play Ibrahim, and figure out your third guy, or if you even wanted to play them. So now you got Gibbs up here at the top. Not a fantastic matchup, but Alabama's got a pretty high team total here, even after going on the road to LSU last week. So Gibbs is a threat every week to have 100 receiving, 100 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, I think he's the best play of the slate. Obviously, so you talked about it. I think it's a little contrarian to pay up in 2 spots for running back this week. We'll get to one of the value plays. But Gibbs and Chase Browns are my favorite plays. Eric Gray last week also, we joke about his price all the time. He's had back-to-back, I think, 30-point fantasy performances, so I wouldn't mind him here, although West Virginia is much worse against the pass. Mayan Williams also, Travion Henderson is out. Mayan Williams played every single snap except I think one last week against Northwestern, so the volume's going to be there. My Blake Corum take this week is, last week against Rutgers, he got 20 carries. I think, you mentioned they play Illinois next week and they play Ohio State. Everyone is just assuming simulate the season, and then Ohio State and Michigan are undefeated. And obviously they're playing. I don't expect them to lose to Nebraska today, but Corum only got 20 carries. I say only against Rutgers last week. This is, they're 30-point favorites here. Now he could definitely get there on 15 to 20 carries. I'm not saying that. Corum, after me saying this, will definitely have 15 carries for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I expect him to get a little bit of a break here. So at that ownership, I'm not going to full fade him because you've seen, like I mentioned, the upside is there. Corum, I think I like Donovan Edwards a lot more. So Gibbs and Brown are my favorite spend ups here. And I will be way underweight on Blake Corum. So if you guys have followed my reverse jinxes all year, you might want to just load up on Corum then.
Yeah, actually, I think that logic makes sense. If the game goes, according to the projected script and Michigan blows them out, This is a good spot for them to potentially give him a bit of a rest. But all three of the guys, I don't mind mixing and matching, and I'm not going to take a strong stand there in my GPP pool this week because I don't love the next range. Like I've missed out on the Eric Gray boat, so I don't want to pay
Yeah.
7,600 for him and try to hop aboard. Once it's already made it to the top of the mountain there. So not a ton of interest in Gray. Mayan Williams, I suppose, is fine, but you're not getting anything of a discount there. With Henderson out, he's in play, but I mean, nothing you're getting super excited about. Raheem Sanders has leveled off a bit after a hot start to the year. So I don't love a lot in the 7K range. Judkins, a lot of upside, but he's not getting all the carries, and they're facing Alabama today. So, is there anything in the next range that you would think, okay, maybe I can prioritize this over Brown or Gibbs?
Yeah, this range kind of screams GPP, just like the 7K range does at quarterback. Judkins, you mentioned, Zach Evans got an extra week to get healthy over the bye week. I think that Judkins splits more, but man, this guy's had a ridiculous season. So if this is a litmus test, right? If he's able to go against Bama and just destroy, I mean, Judkins is for real. Will Shipley, I do like. He's one of the, I mentioned running back isn't like, you don't see a ton of workhorses on this slate. Not saying that Shipley necessarily is, but he's got a pretty safe, like 20, 25 touches. At that price, his price never seems to move, so I like him. Tyjae Spears is an interesting running back for GPPs. Last week, kind of same thing against Tulsa. They kind of controlled that game. He split carries 3 ways, but he still got there on 13 carries. So in a close game against UCF, I think he gets a lot more carries here, maybe up to 20 or so. And I think that he's a great GPP play at that ownership. Everyone else, Jabari Small's coming back. I don't really have much interest, six in that 6K range. Rocket Sanders, I think we looked it was Mississippi State that KJ Jefferson was out. Rocket Sanders is going to get volume no matter what. So I do like him. And even if we've seen him get there pretty much, even if Jefferson's out. So I like Rocket Sanders a lot here in close games like last week against Liberty. They look horrible, but he got a lot of the carries. So I think Rocket Sanders, Shipley, Spears are kind of my main targets here for GPPs. And you can see they're not going to be owned.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of ownership in this range as well. Everyone will kind of prioritize the top end and then the punt range, which we'll get to. I mean, you look at this ownership on the 6K and the higher 5Ks, nobody above like 5% in here. Until you get down to Edwards, who we already kind of mentioned. Obviously, if Michigan rolls all over Nebraska, you could see Edwards get quite a few carries today to stay sharp. RJ Harvey splitting backfield snaps there for UCF, but he's going to project reasonably well at that $5,400 price point. Those are the only two guys in this mid tier that have any type of ownership. And if you're kind of off of quorum, I'd imagine that Edwards is a guy you've got quite a bit of interest in tournaments.
Yeah, I think Edwards, like I talked about last couple weeks, I think Edwards has got 15 or so carries. So here, I think that he's got a lot of upside. He's going to get carries no matter what. If it's a blowout, even better. Like if Michigan's winning 35-0 at halftime and he has 2 touchdowns in the first half, I don't think it's not like he's not going to get work in the second half. They'll probably rest Corum. So I like Edwards a lot. Katron Allen is right above that too. We saw him against Indiana last week. Now him and Singleton are basically splitting time. Allen did get all the touchdown variants last week. So I do like Singleton in GPPs. You see that low ownership on him. Obviously you see both Singleton and Allen project well, but they are splitting snaps. RJ Harvey is the annoying guy because it's like you see timeshares and it's like, why is RJ Harvey splitting time with Bowser? Bowser's getting like 3.5 yards a carry. RJ Harvey's getting like 5+. So you just have to realize that even if you play RJ Harvey, he projects well, but we do have that in there in the split. I like him in GPPs, but it's just going to be tough because he's probably not going to get all the carries, and Tulane does have a good matchup. So I will be overweight on Harvey here just because I think the kid is really talented, but you just have to know that he is going to split snaps and he is going against a good Tulane defense. So I like him, and Edwards is probably my favorite play of the 5Ks.
All right, and if we get down to the bottom range, I'm just going to sort by projected ownership so that I don't have to scroll all the way through it. We've got a couple guys that project pretty well in the 3 and 4K range. I've highlighted the 4 of them that we've got with reasonable projections. Williams for LSU, Diggs for Notre Dame, Norton for Iowa State, and then Levine for SMU, who is the clear chalk play, given that he's had like 40 touches the last 2 weeks. Obviously, he got opportunity due to injury, but he certainly secured a role, even if he's not getting all the carries. And at 3,400 against USF, like he is the clear chalk today. So how do you handle these potential punt guys?
Yeah, Levine, and it sounds like someone tweeted a beat writer earlier that said that Trey Siggers is probably not going to go today. You probably definitely need to monitor that. But yeah, Levine has got, I think, 15, 17 carries. He's dead min price. USF is awful. So, I mean, he's really your lock and load. Like if you're playing cash, unless you get some kind of news that he's not going to go, then, I mean, he's your clear play of the slate. Cartavius Norton for Iowa State, I think he is a little bit riskier. Oklahoma State's defense is bad, but it's not like he's not guaranteed to get all the snaps he did last week. Then Logan Diggs, I haven't been on this the Notre Dame train. Obviously they smashed Clemson last week. Logan Diggs is going to project pretty well, but once again, he's going to split snaps maybe three ways in that backfield. He can definitely get there because he's cheap, but I'm not that high on Diggs. And then Josh Williams, same thing. I mean, he's going to be out there. He's going to split time still. Arkansas is much better against the run than against the pass. So, I mean, when you have a guy like Levine, I'd rather just load up on him and just take my chances elsewhere with some cheaper receivers. I'm not really much on Williams or Diggs. I do have some Norton because I think that he's in a great spot at that cheap price against Oklahoma State. But yeah, Levine, unless you get some kind of news that Siggers is going to be back or that they're going to split carries, I think there's another cheap running back that they were talking about that might split with him, Kamar Wheaton, who's 3.2K. So just have to monitor that and see where it goes. But Levine is, you can see the projection. Like he's a shoe into the slate. If you're playing cash or, single entries, like he's got to be in your lineup.
Yeah, don't try to get cute in that spot for sure at that salary. With the way that he's played the last couple weeks, he has certainly secured a lion's share of the work for now. All right, let's go ahead and move to receiver here. And once again, we see SMU. SMU could have the chalkiest play at all three of the skill positions, which is a little bit weird to see. Usually if the passing game is the chalk, you don't have a running back that's also the chalk, but I think that's just the way it goes today with Mordecai Rice, and you got the cheap $3,400 running back play there. So Rice and Hutchinson at the top, clearly projecting above everyone else. You got Marvin Harrison there as well. Charlie Jones lost in the shuffle today in a really tough matchup. Illinois has allowed the fewest yards per game in all of FBS this year. So despite losing to Michigan State last week, tough to bank on going against that defense. But who do you prefer out of this top group of wide receivers?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think if you're playing single entries, like it's tough to jam in both Rice and Hutchinson and GPPs. I think that's a definite play that you can go to. Man, Rice is in a great spot, like you said. It's hard to see him failing here. I mean, I think he's got a pretty good floor. Ceiling wise, it just kind of depends. You saw last week, even when they put up 77 points, I think he only had one touchdown. And obviously that's touchdown variance, right? But speaking of touchdown variance, Xavier Hutchinson can't get in the end zone. I mean, this guy had I don't think I've seen such a disparity in terms of targets to touchdowns. He just doesn't get in. So he's going to be a little bit low owned. So if you just finally, think that he gets in the end zone a few times here, I think he's a little bit better of a play than Rice. You mentioned Charlie Jones. I think Devon Witherspoon for Illinois is the top-rated cornerback in the country on PFF. I think he's been targeted 50 times and he's only allowed 14 catches. So, yeah, I don't like Jones here at all at that price. And Harrison and Buka are pretty interesting too in GPPs. I don't think you see that comparison to Rice. What are the chances that Harrison or Buka puts up a 40-point performance at half the ownership or a third of the ownership as Rice? I think it's pretty good. So I like both of them in GPPs. Not to say that I'm off Rice. I think Rice and Hutchinson in cash games is going to give you a really stable floor. I think Harrison and Buka Mims down there also gives you a pretty good ceiling. So I don't know what I'm going to do at wide receiver in my main lineup yet. I'm depends on what I do at quarterback, obviously, but I definitely think of this range, you've got pretty safe options in Rice and Hutchinson. It's just you're going to eat the ownership there, so you just have to make that decision.
I did pull up the box score from last week. So of Mordecai's 9 touchdowns, 3 to Redding on 4 catches, 1 to Moochie Dixon, 1 to Goffney, 2 to Maryland, and Rice did have 2.
Okay.
9 for 86 and 2 touchdowns last week. And then Levine, 25 carries, 146 yards, and a touchdown in that 77-63 win, which was kind of laughable to see, like a live 140 point total at one
Yeah, no
point. It was like,
regulation. Yeah.
it's like, wait a minute, did I accidentally open up the college basketball odds? I don't know, but um, Houston actually outgained SMU 710 total yards to 642. Wild game there last
Wow.
week. 16 total passing touchdowns in the game. So don't know if they'll put up that kind of mark again today, but you never know. All right, you kind of went down through that next range there as we head into kind of the 6K range once again, kind of the dead zone because the stars and scrubs build is the way that most people are going to go on DraftKings today, just the way it builds. So we don't have basically any ownership on the 6Ks. Mayor for Notre Dame, they finally increased his price. We can keep chasing Parker Washington if we want. Maybe it's the day that Tillman gets back in the mix. Like, I don't hate Tillman in GPPs at 6,500. This is a guy that we all expected to be priced up with Hutchinson and Rice kind of towards the beginning of the year before we missed some time. So I'd say Tillman in this range if I had to pick out a tournament play, but anybody in the 6Ks you like here?
Yeah, I've been Fanduel, especially if we'll get to that, has been making me broke on Tillman the last couple of weeks because they refuse to increase his price. But I mean, yeah, here against Missouri, like I said, I think this is a spot where Tennessee's going to open it back up. Like this, you see Oregon, right? Oregon hasn't put up less than 40 points all season long outside of Georgia, and then Georgia holds Tennessee to 14. So I expect him to get back on track. He does have some ownership here. I like Ja'Cory Brooks. He played every single snap, I think, last week against LSU, and everyone talks about, and I think they're talking about game day this morning, Bryce Young doesn't have that number one guy, and Brooks was his main target last week. Obviously, Gibbs has taken away some of those targets, but this is somewhere where cheap. You're looking for a guy that's getting double-digit targets. I think Brooks is definitely worth a look in GPPs. My GPP play here, right below that at 6K, is Jaleel Farouk, and I'm a little bit biased. Like, I've been on him all year, but the deep ball is where West Virginia is very, it's susceptible. So Farouk is definitely like, he returns kicks for them. He's got great speed. Like, you are just kind of like with Mims. Like, I definitely wouldn't play him and Mims in the same lineup because they're both like kind of home run options. But Farouk is someone that I do like just as a large field GPP. You see the 1% ownership. You can just play him. If you're playing 20 lives, you can play him in 2 and be over the field. He's not going to kill you. But I think he does have some home run ability here. And like, I think his line is not going to be like 8 for 150 and 2. It's going to be like 3 for 140 and 2 or something like he's going to have to catch 2 bombs. And so I just think he's worth a shot there in GPPs at that price.
Yeah, don't hate that call, especially with not a lot of ownership coming in this range. As you mentioned, doesn't take a lot to get over the field. Isaiah Williams, maybe somebody you could consider against Purdue if you're especially in lineups where maybe you don't have Chase Brown as a pivot off of that. Weaver in some game stacks at 5,900 if you're playing quarterback for USF or running back some SMU guys. Don't mind him in that type of build. He'll be somewhat popular, probably the most popular in this range. And then I kind of like that West Virginia-Oklahoma game to shoot out. And obviously West Virginia, I think they'll maybe go to the air a little bit more now that Donaldson is out. I think Sam James is really interesting at 5,500 in tournaments this week. He's kind of my bold call of a guy who might, break the slate in that kind of range, assuming that this game turns into a shootout and if you have some Oklahoma exposure on the other side. You've got Boutte for LSU, still pretty cheap at 5,300, probably more of a cash play at this point as he's become a little more consistent as the year has gone along. Otherwise, not a lot of ownership here in the 5Ks either. Who do you like in this range?
Yeah, Boutte is I just can't quit him. I mean, we were begging to play him at like 7K earlier in the season, and once again, this is the best matchup he's probably going to have all year. So he's led them in targets each week. He's not expensive, so Boutte's probably going to make my main lineup if it, obviously has Daniels in it. Sam James, I do like that call. I am a Sam James guy. I feel like I've been playing Sam James for like 4 years now, waiting for him to get that big hit, but he has looked a little bit better lately. Malik Neighbors, I think, is interesting in GPPs too, just because you see that ownership discrepancy between him and Boutte. I would probably not play them in the same lineup because it's really unlikely that Daniels gets 2 wide receivers there. But Neighbors isn't like getting it out targeted by a huge number. And so I do like him a little bit in GPPs. Ronnie Bell is a guy that I'd probably only play in lineups that don't have Corum, because then you're just assuming that if they do blow out, Michigan does blow out Nebraska, that Bell gets 2 through the air. And so that, like, if Corum doesn't get 3 touchdowns here, it just kills them. So yeah, I would not play those two in the same lineup. But yeah, those are really my only targets, I think, in the 5Ks. I didn't mention Weaver when I was talking 6Ks, but yeah, he's the number one target for Marsh. So I probably, there's going to be, I think SMU has like a 4 touchdown total. So a good chance that Weaver's really involved there. So I like him as a play too.
All right, if we want to look for punt options, I can sort by our point per dollar projections. Again, we've got Maryland had a couple touchdowns last week for SMU. He's 3,500. Jordan Curley, it projects pretty well. I mean, basically all these SMU guys have pretty solid projections. Landers right at 5K. There's not a whole lot in that 3K range outside of the SMU guys. The Goffney, another one. I mean, you can basically, one of those guys is going to have a good day, just a matter of figuring out which one it is. You can mix and match them in your GPPs if you want to. Don't think anybody else is probably the one week where maybe you're not going super low in cash for a third wide receiver. You're doing it at running back today with Levine as opposed to receiver, so a little bit different from what the builds have been the last few weeks. But I mean, do you have a take on these cheaper receivers? Do you have a strong feeling about one of the SMU guys over another, or are you just kind of mixing and matching them?
Yeah, the way I kind of view this, at least the SMU skill guys outside of Rice, is like, what happens last week if they don't put up 77 points? Let's say SMU puts up 40 points or something like that. And like RJ Maryland caught 2 touchdowns last week. I think he went through the box score. Like, I am definitely with the group function on Lineup HQ. I'm only playing one of Maryland, Curley, and you have Goffney on here at mid 3K. I'm only playing one of those guys. I mean, last week was the ultimate seat. Like, it was like I think if you total the fantasy points of all those SMU pass catchers, you probably had 5 guys with 20 plus. I think the chances of that happening this week are a lot less. I mean, that's an ultimate ceiling game performance. So I am not going to be underweight on these guys just because they are so cheap in a great game environment, but I'm not really looking to get way overweight. I think there are some guys that are a little bit cheaper. Dimitri Stanley is a guy I like for Iowa State. That's going to be like 3.8K. Cameron Latu and Cade Stover are also good punts, and you're just trying to get them in the end zone. So it is possible that, Tyler Levine, and that's the other thing, is like Levine's such a good play. So you're almost eating into yourself. Like, unless you think, at least my mindset is like, you can't go in saying SMU scores another 77 points and all these guys get there. Like, if you're playing a lot of Levine, you probably don't want to have a ton of these guys, even though they're cheap. But if you're going to get like 10, 12 points from it, it's probably not going to be enough in GPP. So definitely in lineups with Levine, I don't really like these guys as much. I definitely only want one of them in the lineup. But Yusuf Terry is also an interesting 3K, use Dan back term, 3K crapper. That's going to be out there a lot for UCF. He's a good pivot off Goffney. No one's going to play him. And so I do have him in a couple lineups down there. But yeah, it's really dumpster diving outside those SMU guys.
Yeah, for sure. Not a whole lot to feel super great about. So, all right, that should be for DraftKings. We'll go ahead and touch on FanDuel quick while I load that up. So our local high school, my wife is a diehard local crazy for our high school team here. Not that we've got like a vested interest. Our kids aren't in high school and probably aren't going to be football players. Sorry, kids. But, I'm 5'6", and didn't give them the best genes for that. But my wife's brother, so my brother-in-law played when he was in high school. But, I mean, he's, our age now. He's in his 30s. But she still lives and dies by the local high school games, and they are in the state quarterfinals today. So since we've been married, they've made it to the semifinals twice, and they have never made it to the finals. So they're in the quarterfinals today. And she's a wreck. My wife is a nervous wreck. It's really weird to see the woman, be a nervous wreck about sports. But I can't say anything because that would be hypocritical, because I get that way too. So our squad is 9-2. They're facing an undefeated team, but in the local circles, I'd say that our group is maybe a slight favorite. They've played a really tough schedule. And it should be a really competitive game. But my wife's a nervous wreck today, so hopefully the old Sterling Golden Warriors pull it out, and we've got a semifinal game next week, which would be at home. But yeah, so the wife's got football on the brain today as well, and I'll have to. They do big
Is
old.
there a showdown slate for that? Can we get in a showdown slate?
It's pretty wild for Illinois. Obviously, high school football is really big down south and stuff. But even here, like our high school has its own like TV network, and so we got a subscription to that so that you can watch all the games on TV. Even when they're playing an hour away or something. That I don't know. It's just weird for me. Like I went to the neighboring high school across the river, and my 4 years of high school, our varsity team went 0-36. So my team, my high school that I went to, the football program is just abysmal. So I cared not about high school football, and then of course, married my wife, and the football team on the other side of the river is very good, and that's the town we live in now, and our kids are in the school district. But yeah, we got a TV network and everything to watch the game. So anyway, I got FanDuel loaded up here. I guess we'll touch on the late games here that are only on the FanDuel slate like we usually do. But any major pricing differences from the earlier games that stand out to you, like guys that you think you really want to play on FanDuel? I think Mims is certainly one. Like he's been cheap on FanDuel pretty much all year. But anything that stands out from those players in the earlier games?
Yeah, I mentioned Cedric Tillman is 6.5 on DraftKings. He's 6.6 on FanDuel. Now, like last couple of weeks, it's been warranted because he hasn't done anything. But I'm going to continue to go back to that. Well, like we talk about every week, 6.6 on FanDuel is basically like he's 4.2K on DraftKings. So if Cedric Tillman was 4.4 on DraftKings, everyone would want to play him, right? Yeah, Mims is like the reverse algorithm to where he's 7.2K. What is he on FanDuel? I think he's the same price on both.
He's 7,300 on FanDuel.
Yeah, 73. So same thing. So he's always in play. Farouk is, talking about pricing too. I mentioned him as a GPP play. He's 5.8K and on FanDuel, and so he's 6K on DraftKings. So once again, I even like him a lot more on FanDuel because it's all about touchdowns, right? So you're not playing Farouk to get 10 catches. You're playing him to get 2 touchdowns. So I like him. RJ Harvey, you've got him noticed too. Same thing. You get a good discount on him, and same as Jahmyr Gibbs. So all those guys are getting kind of discounts on the earlier games. Kayshon Boutte is also one guy who, once again, he's equivalent of like 4K on DraftKings. So yeah. I like those guys early. But you can notice the thing I do like about FanDuel today is like I don't have to worry about getting Tyler Levine right. So that game's not on. So FanDuel's got a lot of later games, a lot of good games. With Bo Nix is on the slate. That's always going to be a good one.
So is it Bo Nix or is it Drake May for you today?
Whew, man, have fun. I was doing it today, and I do have a couple. Have fun trying to build a Drake May Bo Nix lineup. It's pretty tough. Man, May, and I went to the game last week. I mean, Oregon was messing with Colorado. Like Oregon scored 49 points. Like Bo Nix caught a screen pass for a touchdown. They lined up Noah Sewell, the linebacker, and even took one of Bo Nix's 1-yard touchdowns away from him. So I think Washington, Oregon is a shootout. I love Penix today on FanDuel. Washington has the number 1 pass offense in the country in terms of yards per game, and Oregon is giving up 300. So I like that game to shoot out. If I had to pick between May and Nix, I'm probably going May just because me with the late night game. But I mean, Nix's floor is accounting for 4 or 5 touchdowns. I mean, I think he's got 13 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is more than some running backs. So I like him, both of those guys. But yeah, plug in. I think if you plug in both of those guys in a lineup, how much salary do you have left? 7,200. Yeah. So you can do it. Rufus Harvey, you can like those cheap wide receivers. So I'll definitely have a couple of those. But those are definitely the two main options. And then Jaden Daniels is a good play at his price point. And Penix, like I talked about, at 10.8K. He's expensive. No one's going to play him. And I think Washington, Oregon kind of shoots out.
Yeah, interesting tournament target there as well. Running backs in the later games, basically just Bijan taking up ownership there. They're the most exciting later games outside of, Washington, Oregon with the quarterbacks, and then UNC Wake with a huge total because UNC's defense is so bad. But Wake hasn't looked quite as strong lately. Still don't mind like a Perry or a Worthy or something like that in a GPP build. But anybody else from these later games that interests you?
Yeah, Wake has been bad. I don't know what's going on with them. Usually the cure is North Carolina, so I like Hartman a lot today. Perry is too cheap. We got to touch on Richie Reese real quick for Baylor. So last week, if you played DraftKings, Richard Reese, no news, like everyone was worried about A-Chain. People are trying to get body language based on what A-Chain is doing in the end zone and him coming out late for warmups. No one's worried about Richie Reese. He's got 30 carries the last 2 weeks. And last week, Richie Reese gets 4 carries, and it comes out after the game that, guess what? He's got the flu. So you probably have to monitor that, but it's not a night game. But I love Richie Reese in GPPs. If he knocked 2 things out. One, he was sick last week, and then he didn't get in a lot of carries. So, put him right back in for 30 carries. Not a great matchup, but he's a good running back on this slate. And then it's not really a hot take of mine, but because you can see it with the Vegas spread. But I think Texas rolls TCU tonight at home. Bijan's too cheap here for his price. I think Ewers. I mentioned in the article, I have a lot of Ewers worthy Bijan lineup because I think Texas just puts it on TCU here. Unless I do feel bad for Bijan though. He's got to watch out because every single main offensive player that TCU plays, they get hurt. So if Bijan, I can't make any promises if Bijan gets hurt. Obviously, you hope that doesn't happen. But the UNC Wake total is 78 points. So you definitely want to get exposure to that game any way you can. And these are some really good games on the night slate on Fanduel.
Yeah, just tough to make it all work with the salaries, given that Bijan, Nix, May, Downs. They're all pretty expensive, but you can certainly mix and match these guys in your lineups as you wish. All right, so with that, we can go ahead and put a wrap on the show and get out of here. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, be sure to give us a thumbs up. We appreciate that very much. And good luck with all your lineups today, everybody. So for Micah, I'm Justin. Thanks to Steve for producing behind the scenes for us as well. And we hope you enjoy your weekend, everybody. Take care. Maybe. Hopefully Steve is okay. Producer Steve, we hope you're okay. Let me check and make sure if we're still on the air. We can maybe touch on the night games on DraftKings real quick too if we got a second. Hang on. Let's see if that YouTube stream's still going. And if you're watching us, bear with us here. Yeah, we'll do it live. Somebody said, I think we're still on. We're still on the air. Well, let's go. Let's peek at DraftKings here for just a second. Go to the night games. Maybe we talked, we so much about these late games that Steve went to go put in some lineups. Maybe he fell asleep. Okay. Steve mentioned he's having some problems with the software. Anyway, well, that's okay. I've been there. I've been there with my share of issues with the software. But anything on the DraftKings night slate that stands out, that's a guy that we didn't mention. I think they've got most of the same later games as FanDuel does. But for those that are waiting, we've got A-Chain on that slate as well again.
Yeah, it's good that we actually got here, and we can wrap it up real quick after this. But A-Chain, our boy Andy Smith has said that he's really plugged into the Aggies, that A-Chain might sit this game. So make sure to, and this is the first lock of the slate. Yeah, 6:30. So A-Chain's projected for the highest ownership at that price. He may not play. So I think PSU might have baked it into the projections, but watch out for A-Chain. But yeah, everything else is basically status quo. Damian Martinez is a good play, but watch out for A-Chain if you are playing tonight.
All right. We'll try this. Take 2. We'll see if the outro clip rolls and we get out of here. Otherwise, I'm just throwing my headset down and we're going blank screen. But no, just kidding. In all seriousness, we'll do take 2 here. Thanks to Steve for producing for us and hopefully getting that software glitch worked out. Thanks to Micah for joining me as well. I'm Justin. Have a great Saturday. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you later.